Well, welcome everybody for coming in to join us on this conversation with Virginia. My name's Sam Reeder. I'm co-founder of Wonder. We're a social learning platform who are committed to supporting people who are interested in the environment and social impact. We bring people together to collaborate, share ideas, and learn together so we can take action together. And today I'm with Virigina Cinquemani, who's the founder of Green Gorilla, and they're on a mission to help sustainability and environmental professionals overcome their day-to-day issues with project stakeholders. Personally, I've got friends in this area as well, Virginia, and I know that that's such a massive issue for the industry and for the way we need to move our economies and societies. So I've got to know Virginia over the last year or so, and she's a fantastic woman with so many ideas, which we'll dive into in a moment. But you're also the author of Sustainable, which is all about how to find that success as a sustainability professional. And like you say, there you go, a little plug there. But I've heard a lot of people again just getting loads of great reviews on how that's supporting people, because it is such a quick changing industry and things are happening so fast. We'll dive into this in a second, but it sounds like the book's really catching fire with a lot of people on those topics. But also you've supported us with our competition, which I can't be any more grateful for your support there. And we really hope that a lot of the competition entrants are going to have a great time with whoever wins the spot on your mastermind. So we're looking forward to that as well. But maybe, Virginia, if you don't mind, just giving everyone a bit of an introduction to who you are and a bit of your background and what's brought you to this position to set up Green Gorilla yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. It's really an honor. Also because I've been following the evolution of Wonder in the last year or so. So it's quite exciting. So me, I started, I hate to say, about 20 years ago as an architect, qualified architect. I worked a little bit in the field for about 3 years or so. I started as a technical person. And then I realized actually I wanted more. I wanted more meaning in my life. I wanted to contribute more. So I moved into sustainability in the built environment. And so for many years, so probably now we're coming to 14 years, I've been doing sustainability in the built environment in the form of consultancy and business development as well. And I worked for the same company for a very long time. And there I realized actually my fellow people, so sustainability consultants especially and environmental consultants, were struggling significantly to communicate that message of sustainability to their clients and to other people. And that became a bit of a mission. Once I left my previous employment, I really wanted to support environmental consultants and environmental professionals to make a difference, because you could be as qualified as you want, you could have as many technical abilities as you like, but if you're not able to communicate them effectively, nothing will ever change. People will talk in jargon and there won't be real communication. So that's how Green Gorilla started, as a mission to support the sustainability professionals. So that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that sounds really interesting. Obviously, suffering the pain yourself puts you in the best position as an expert to go over those points. And I just wondered if you'd mind maybe sharing a few pieces, because maybe some of the audience can relate, just to, I suppose, not revealing any names or people confidentially, but just some of the pain points that you or blockers that you found and expect others to find in your course of what you aim to overcome.
I think the biggest problem and blocker for people in this field is having to sell something, a product, or even a sustainable solution of some sort, like an energy, a renewable energy source of some sort, to a client that is not interested. So sustainability is still perceived, in spite of what we see on TV or on the papers, on social media, as something that is nice to have, like an add-on instead of a necessity, or something that we must really embark into. And so there is a lot of discontent and unhappiness in the sustainability world, because we are passionate people, we're people of values, and when we see these brick walls and we can't break them, we can't convince people of our ideas, That's where the problem arises, the frustration is huge. But for the majority of cases, I've seen my clients struggling with making an impact and communicating the message to people that seem to be completely, uninterested. They really don't care. And so my work with some collaborators who are business psychologists and leadership and management experts has been to put together training courses and coaching to support people to convince the inconvincible. So to really push, through the boundaries and manage to grab people's attention and get them to really do what we want them to do, which is embrace sustainability.
Thank you very much for sharing that. It's interesting how the psychology element is so key to this. Obviously, sustainability leans on a lot of science in terms of the problems that we're suffering with. But is there a spiritual or belief system, kind of psychological piece that's as important, if not so maybe more important? Because if no one's listening, the science doesn't matter. And just wondering, with the psychology element, what have you found are kind of the different personalities that people expect to confront in a business with the different stakeholders?
Yeah, I think the major discovery for me was to realize that depends very much not on you, but on the person you got in front of you, whether they're going to be convinced or not. So what I mean is, we usually come, for example, in a meeting with something to sell to someone, okay? Maybe an idea, a project, whatever it is, we need to convince them of something. But we come from our point of view and our personality and our style, whether we are extroverts or introverts, or whether we are task-focused versus people-focused. And we use that style because that's what we know, because this is who we are. However, what I learned is that you need to understand completely who you got in front of you, read the sort of person they are, whether they, what personality they have. And I'm going to give you an example in a second. And listen to them. And that's probably the number one tip, is listen attentively to them to really understand what they care about and use that as your way in for convincing them. The example is probably everyone can relate to. If you speak to a CEO or someone really high up in a hierarchy in a company, they generally speaking, someone who doesn't have a lot of time to spare, and so they're quite straight to the point, task focused. They might listen to you 3 seconds and then move on. So, and that is what there are a series of psychological tests you can do to understand your own personality or the people personality, but we use the DISC personality. So DISC stands for dominant, influential, steady, and compliant. So someone has the type I just described will be dominant. And so you can't go there and start with the fluffy arguments and the ethical arguments and, we need to save the world type of argumentation. You might want to talk about return on investment of your idea. And you might want to talk about how easy and fast it's going to be for them to make their money back, or how many practical advantages there will be in adopting your idea. So that's just an example. And depending on who you got in front of you, you need to flex your style. So that's the bottom line of how you would approach someone. But there is a lot more in terms of the psychology of people and how you can change your own mindset to start from a place of power instead of defeat. Because that's the other thing. When we have had a number of setbacks, like a number of meetings that weren't good enough and you weren't able to convince anyone of anything, then of course you feel deflated. And if you listen to the news and you see all the doom and gloom, then you feel deflated. So there is lots that can be done to actually boost your self-compassion, self-esteem, self-confidence, in order to be able to become a real powerhouse and sell that message powerfully. So this is what we teach at Green Gorilla, all these little techniques to become a stronger person altogether,
I think it sounds really interesting, and there's so many correlations to life, it seems there. One of the biggest things I'm hearing there, Virginia, if I'm right, is it's almost starting with the individual who's trying to create change rather than thinking it's the other person's fault or the other person's issue. You're starting with understanding and compassion, but then you also mentioned there about, well, what are my strengths? So what's my, build my self-esteem up to know that I can lead this. So I like the idea of starting with yourself rather than always blaming others. And I think that sounds like a really powerful way of trying to collaborate with those stakeholders rather than just to see them as the enemy who are putting a blocker up. Try to understand them.
Exactly. What I always say is also you have influence over others, but you are control over yourself. So the first person you should act upon is you. You can change yourself. Doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter your, the way you're made up. You can change your mindset at any point if you do the right work for it, and that starts, a whole process of becoming more resilient. So it's true. Often we blame the world and the economic downturn and the pandemic and other people, and they're not interested. But then, what are you doing to actually make a difference? And what are you doing to convince them in the right way? And it's ethical. The thing is also, people hate the word selling, which I use all the time, because we are people of value and we think selling is despicable, but it's really not. If you see it as a way of influencing other people to do the right thing, or supporting them, most importantly, to find a solution that is ethical and sustainable and that is going to have a positive impact in the world. So you see yourself as someone who supports others, someone who helps others to find good solutions, not as someone who's trying to sell something that is completely useless, which is the point I have towards selling.
Very powerful. No, I think it sounds a wildly interesting program that even though I'm not necessarily, directly a sustainability professional myself, I think that resilience, the mental fortitude, the way of thinking, it is almost transferable across any line of work, I feel. So that sounds really powerful. You mentioned there about any age as well. For anyone watching, but I'm also interested, do you find that this is applicable to any stage of a career? And does it vary in different ways? Or is there anyone who's specifically useful for this sort of conversation that you have?
In the Mastermind that I started in April, so I start a group every few months, and it's a closed group because I want people to feel comfortable to share their experiences and become friendly with each other in that sense. So the group that I started in April got people that are very young, as in graduates, up to people who are near retirement and everything in between. And people come into the Mastermind to learn different things. But the common theme there is, of course, sustainability and the willingness to change and to make an impact. And I don't think that's related to age. If you are a young, enthusiastic graduate or someone that really wants to break into sustainability as a job, as a career, then this is the place for you. If you're someone who has done a lot in their lives and can share that knowledge with others, but also they want to end their career, on a high, then that's another opportunity. So, an influence on the environment, or influence, a positive influence, I think, we have seen the example of Greta. It doesn't have an age. You could be a child, it could be someone who is, a pensioner. You've seen probably in Extinction Rebellion, people getting arrested, 80 years old, have been arrested. Age doesn't matter, really.
No, I think that's another great thing. That inclusivity that everyone can play a part here is a great point as well. When it comes to in the workplace, have you found that there are different ways of trying to implement strategies with colleagues as well? Like you mentioned about bringing influencers with you, and sometimes your colleagues can be your greatest asset, I suppose. What are some of the things that you've learned personally, but maybe also from the people who participated on your courses, with building that kind of allyship and that team around you? Are there any insights or thoughts you've had over the years about that and the power of that?
I think the thing that definitely turns people off is being a preacher. And we all, in this field, I feel we all are guilty of that at times. Whether you are a passionate vegan or a passionate environmentalist or someone who really wants to make a change, we often, go on the, ivory tower and we shout and we point the finger, and that's not a conducive behavior, not something that fosters necessarily collaboration. What fosters collaboration is a couple of things, which are two very useful techniques to learn in order to influence others. One is to inspire others, and the other one is using logic. And the two together seem to be at odds, but actually combined, they are amazing. And I'll give you an example. If you're given a presentation to your colleagues that you want, for example, to introduce a new sustainability scheme in the office, like a recycling scheme, then you can use the logic to explain why that's important and what's in it for people, which is very important. What do they get out of it? What do they gain? But also you can inspire them and show them how others have done it. You can tell a story about the impact this thing can have on the environment. So the combination of logic and storytelling is super powerful to inspire people. And I think so long as you keep it humble in the way that you don't picture yourself as the savior, someone who's going to be there to save the world, I think you're going to have a lot of success if you use those two together.
That's really interesting as well, this idea of logic and storytelling. I think when you look at influencing people, story obviously is so powerful because it helps bring up emotions in some fashion, which leads to behavior. Is that something that the story element plays a big part on when it comes to, as I say, there's a lot of science behind sustainability, but do we miss sometimes the emotional or the people element of that? And is that a lost opportunity, I suppose, to communicate the importance of it?
I'd say that's the most important thing that we miss, because as technical people, so the majority of sustainability people tend to be technical because they have some form of technical knowledge of materials and energy, etc. And scientists, unfortunately, often lack that, that softer element to them. So the telling the story element. They are data people, they're data driven, and that's, going back to reading people. But what really move people are stories. What really move people are the emotions, like you correctly said. And it's being studied, an extra study, this area, this storytelling is becoming a bit of a buzzword, but it is important. And in the most basic form is simply making your presentations or when you speak more interesting. Using anecdote, using examples. So probably you'll notice I've used a couple of examples, but that comes now natural to me. Because people want to vision it, they want to envision it in their heads, they want to see it. Otherwise they can't buy it. If you just put percentage over data, it comes from here and it comes out from there. Literally, it doesn't stop in your brain. So, it's been demonstrated that storytelling literally changes the chemistry of your brain through oxytocin. It releases oxytocin, which is the same hormone that you release when you hug someone. So, that warm, fuzzy feeling. Obviously, you don't want to, bring your clients to cry or to, but you can entertain them and you can make them curious and you can involve them in your presentations and the way you speak to them. And that's very powerful to be memorable and to get people to, remember you and buy into you and trust you, which is the most important thing. With trust, you're going to be a lot more influential.
No, really powerful. Yeah, can totally see how important that element is, Virginia. With moving into kind of where we are at the moment, obviously all around the world, there's this pandemic in varying degrees. It's impacting people more than others as well. But I'm just interested in whether you're seeing any additional issues than the last, your experience spanning a couple of decades obviously this is very unique. And what do you think are some of the are there any new problems that people have to overcome, or when they're storytelling maybe more through a conference call, are there things that you're picking up or realizing or seeing now that are different in any way in how people communicate in that fashion?
Okay, there are several things there that they can definitely be analysed in that sense, and I've noticed. One thing is that certain elements actually don't change very much over the decades. So from when I started as a young woman at that point, it was a technical, very male-dominated environment, construction. I was feeling very powerless. I was feeling that I didn't have a voice, and I can see that certain people right now have exactly the same experience, depending on the context they're in. So certain things don't really change over time. Of course, the pandemic has brought up, probably has highlighted a lot the anxiety in people, and people are starting making connections between the pandemic and climate change, and how, from one crisis to the next crisis, what world are we living in? Everything seems doomed, and we don't know when this is going to end. Really, I can feel people are a lot more anxious. And that has brought also stillness. So people don't think they can do anything right now. People think, we have to sit still and stay put, and we can't really act on anything. Examples was someone in my mastermind that started the process in April. She was a mum, so as you know, lots of parents have to homeschool their children.
Mm.
And she had this idea to have a business in her mind, and she wanted to put the business together. But she said, we are in the pandemic, I have to homeschool my children. My husband is working full time, I haven't got time. So it was really defeated. She was really, really defeated. But that changed because we together spoke about it at length and came up with a plan on how to actually tackle her dreams one little bit at a time. And I was in the same situation, man. I was homeschooling my children in this little corner of my living room. They were doing stuff and making noise, and I was trying to work. And with a plan, with a goal in mind, with some vision, you can achieve absolutely everything, even if you are in the worst possible conditions. So this is what I've tried to encourage people to do, inspire people to do, is like, okay, you have just to bite-size your dreams. And it doesn't matter, because lots of good companies have come up in recessions. It doesn't really matter in a way. It does for certain, if you want to open a restaurant right now, okay, maybe not a good idea. But there are certain ideas that can fly at any point in time. And so I'd say, even though there are differences and the world, communication is completely different. This becomes a lot more common. And there are certain rules about how to make, conference calls a bit more, effective, let's say, because they're very tiring. They're actually more tiring than physical meetings, I find. But there is always a way, and that's the bottom line. Whatever your challenge, whatever you're dealing with, whether it's anxiety, eco-anxiety, or perhaps you feel you don't know what to do next, or whatever else you got in your mind, there is always a way. And that's down to sitting down, being self-aware, analyze where you're at and where you want to go to, and put together a plan.
Yeah, it sounds, the conversation we've had today, Virginia, it sounds very much around almost the blockers are in sometimes yourself and the individual first before you see them and perceive them in someone else. And that sounds like a very powerful, positive story that can come through by being part of the groups that you put together. I think the last kind of question to dovetail what you've just been speaking about is I'd love to hear about the future as well. What do you see the future in sustainability, and how do you see us taking the next steps? As it might be a big question, but as a society, or maybe even as a global society, what do you hope to see in that future from today?
I I think we can, it can be anything really. We can play whatever, it's down to the individual's responsibility. And I know that a lot of people feel defeated for that reason, because they think, what difference can I make? I'm only one, right? It's down to the governments, it's down to industry. There are big polluters. Okay, there are, the top 70 companies in the world that actually 100 companies that create 70% of carbon emissions in the world. True, absolutely true. But nothing will change unless we change as individuals, and we have the power to create demand from the consumer point of view. And I find this super powerful. For example, I recently realized by doing some research that women are still responsible for the majority of cases for all the purchases at home. Okay, because this is the way it is. Obviously, it's probably less than 50 years ago, but now still we women are responsible for that. Can you imagine the power we have? Because we buy all the products, so we buy lots of the clothes for the family, we buy food. So all our choices, if they are the correct choices, if we all did the right thing, we will create such pressure on companies to adapt, and in turn to governments to adapt and to create new paradigms, really. That is mind-boggling, and we're just one person at a time. But that's how mass movements start. We have beautiful examples from last year and 2 years ago. Again, I have to mention Greta again. One little girl, yes, of course, supported by parents and by other people and other people, but she started as a lonely child in the middle of a square with a sign in her hands. That's all she needed to create a global movement. So one individual absolutely matter. So I don't know, I'm really hopeful, because I am that sort of person that I'm always optimistic. So I really think that lots has changed in the last 24 months. And if we learn the lessons that we are learning through the pandemic and apply them to the climate crisis, I think we can be there quite quickly, because we've seen how societies can react quickly to crisis. Matter of days. So if we took climate crisis and climate change with the same seriousness, wow, we would be out of it in no time.
Really good point. No, I think that's a wonderful sentiment to kind of end on, really, which is about us acknowledging the power we all have as individuals, but the movements we can create as a collective. And even in the mastermind groups you discuss, I imagine that peer-to-peer support network is also very empowering for each other. So I think that's a great vision, Virginia, and thank you very much for today. I'm obviously going to put all the links and information into the caption and the comment of where we place the video and how we distribute that to our networks. But are there any key ways people can get in touch with you at all, Virginia, or how you'd like them to get in touch?
I wanted just to clarify slightly, because I don't know whether we actually explain what the mastermind is. So it's saying.
Yeah, absolutely, fair point. Just go into that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so the Sustainable Mastermind is based on the book Sustainable, this one here, and on the key skills that I believe sustainability professionals should have. Now, the mastermind is open to professionals, but also to enthusiasts, so people who perhaps want to get into sustainability but are not there yet. And the key skills we cover are all the stuff that we touched upon today. So it's communication, is selling, is resilience, which is very important. We touched upon that as well. And project management and people management. Technical, everyone is different, and everyone will have their own ways of, improving their technical abilities. But we should really focus our attention on these skills. And we expand on them, and we talk about how to develop your resilience, how to plan, how to organize better meetings. We talk about eco-anxiety. We talk about an enormous amount of things, because we have 2 webinars a month and a Q&A a month. And then we have one-to-one coaching with me. So I look at individuals and we come up with plans on how to get to their goals quicker. And then, of course, there's the peer-to-peer support, like you said. They're becoming little families almost, which is really beautiful to see. and they support each other, and they cheer, and it's really fantastic to see. So yeah, just to clarify that.
No, thank you.
That is, and it's a year-long.
It's important.
It's a year-long program, so that's what it is. In terms of how to get in touch with me, I'm on Wonder, and also I am on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. And also the website, if you want to learn more about what Green Gorilla does, is thegreengorilla.co.uk.
No, that's excellent. Thank you very much for clarifying that as well, Virginia. And as I say, I'll definitely make sure the links are all down so it's easy for everybody. But I think there's some really interesting points discussed today. So hopefully people are going to take a look at the great work you're doing and the great work that I know your participants in the course are doing as well. With regards to the book, as in terms of that's on Amazon, I believe, as well, or can be purchased through your website?
Unfortunately.
Right.
I'd say that was the quickest and easiest way. Unfortunately, this was easy to do, but I am looking to move the book, and with a different publisher. But it can be purchased via as an ebook or a paperback.
Great, and they can find out more about the book as well on your website, can't they? So,
yeah, absolutely.
So that sounds great. So thank you so much for today, Virginia. It's wonderful to hear the story you've had and the impact you're making as well. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Having me, it was great. Thank you.
Brilliant.